Household and Business Taxation. The Leaving Cert Business course has four main objectives when it comes to taxation. We're looking at it from a business management point of view and comparing household and business management when it comes to taxation. So we're going to be looking at the different types of taxation, how to calculate tax, and the different tax forms. Now, taxation has changed a lot over the last year when it comes to forms in particular, and how it's gone from a hard copy type form to online e-forms. And we'll be looking at that whole system in more detail in the next lesson. For this lesson, we will give an introduction to what taxation is and some of the types of taxes. So when it comes to businesses and households, they are required to pay taxes. And a tax is a compulsory financial charge, and it's placed on residents of a country in order to fund public expenditure. So it's the government that will decide what tax rates to charge. Okay, so when it comes to the budget every year, the government will either increase taxes or decrease tax rates, or even introduce new taxes. So also, the government will introduce certain taxes to influence behaviour. For example, you have excise duties that, again, when it comes to the budget, when it comes to taxes on alcohol or cigarettes, fuel, carbon fuel, and the sugar tax, for instance, they're all introduced to try and discourage consumption, because it's not good for you, it's not good for the environment. And again, the government will use taxes to try and influence behaviour. So as I said, we'll look at the different types of taxes, calculations, so how to calculate tax, income tax, etc. And then the implications of taxations for households and businesses, and compare the different types. Most taxes are relevant to both, but businesses will have extra or more taxes to pay. So, some key terms: direct taxation we're going to look at now, indirect taxation, progressive tax, regressive tax, tax evasion, and tax avoidance. So the learning outcome for this lesson is to outline. So there's your learning, your outcome verb. So if you're asked a question in your exam, normally it'd be to outline the main types of taxes that are paid by households and businesses. So many different types of tax exist in Ireland, as we know. They can be direct or indirect. And the difference between the two is direct is a tax on income earned. So people know about the tax that they're paying when it comes to this. So for example, PAYE, PRSI, any USC, any tax on their pay. Okay, and even businesses corporation tax. So it's known about, people are well aware of it. It comes directly out of their pay and sent to the revenue commissioners. Indirect taxation, on the other hand, is taxation that we're not so aware of. It's put on items, I suppose, we get the price, but we're not aware that we're paying so much VAT all the time, or customs duties on goods and services that are bought. So, and we look at some examples further on. Progressive tax then, or regressive tax. So progressive is where, I suppose, when it comes to higher rates of tax, for instance, PAYE on income tax, it's I suppose the more you earn, the more you pay. So it's progressive in that low income earners don't pay as much tax because they can't afford it. Whereas regressive, think of it as a negative thing, I suppose, is paid or applied at the same rate regardless. Okay, so VAT, for instance, 23% VAT, everyone pays that on certain goods. Okay, so even low income earners have to pay that. So even though taxes, nobody likes to have to pay taxes, but they are an essential source of revenue for the government to run the country. So if the government did not receive these taxes, they would not be able to run hospitals, schools, public transport, defence forces, pay for social welfare. So it's very important that we have a tax system and that we are able to then have a society in which everyone benefits. So, but unfortunately, as tax is a negative thing, I suppose, people do try to evade it. So, or avoid, right? So looking at the differences between the two, to evade is illegal. So you just do not pay your taxes. Whereas if you avoid certain taxes, but you do it in a legal way, and we'll talk about that now in a moment, it's, I suppose, looking at loopholes in the tax system and how to get out, especially with businesses, get out having to pay as much tax. So tax evasion is against the law, as I said. So it's been, people or businesses they're dishonest. They don't maybe report as much profit, so they're not paying as much tax. Or they overclaim on any tax benefits or deductions. So an example here would be employers paying staff cash rather than having to pay through the books as such. In other words, it wouldn't be recorded, and that's illegal. And they're evading taxes, especially PRSI, because every employee that a business has, they pay a certain percentage of PRSI on them. So, as I said, it's illegal, and there are fines there for that if you're caught. So tax avoidance, on the other hand, is lawful. It's all about minimizing your tax liability. So I suppose if you have, in a business, if you have assets, you could be claiming relief or allowances, but also, hiding money maybe in tax havens abroad, not having to pay as much tax then because their tax systems have lower percentages, etc. So we call this using loopholes, but it's not illegal as such. Okay, so here are some of the examples. If you look at these two tables here, for households only, there are certain taxes that are paid that businesses wouldn't have to pay, and equally businesses have to pay taxes that households don't have to pay. So PRSI, or pay-related social insurance, is a tax on employees' pay. They pay a certain percentage, but also the employer pays a certain percentage for every employee. But it's seen as different in that it's from the employer's perspective. There are different rates. Another tax on income is USC, or Universal Social Charge. Businesses don't have to pay that. Income tax, or PAYE, pay as you earn, is another tax on pay, but again, businesses don't have to pay that. Local property tax is a tax only for households, not for businesses. But businesses have their own equivalent type taxes, like commercial rates, that households don't have to pay. And corporation tax is a tax on profits. So as we know, talked about, 12.5%. Taxes that are common to both then, we have capital gains tax and capital acquisition tax. So we'll talk about it in more detail later on, and just note some of the acronyms there. So if you were asked a question in your exam, what does CGT stand for? What does CAT stand for? Just to know them. And I suppose taxation does lend itself a lot to those type of questions because there's quite a few acronyms in it. Vehicle registration tax, another one that businesses and households will have to pay. Excise duty, as I said before, it's on cigarettes and alcohol to try and deter people from using. And deposit interest retention tax, or DIRT, is a tax on the interest earned on savings in a bank account or in any savings account. So other taxes then would be motor tax. You're well aware of what that is, and customs or import duties. So when or businesses are importing goods, or people are importing, buying from abroad, they'll have to pay duties or taxes on that, especially outside of the European Union. Value-added tax then is VAT on any goods or services bought. So you'll have your 23%, and we look later on at other rates. So there will be a lot lower rates as well. for different goods and services. So they're the main taxes. We will look at them in the next lesson in more detail. So for now, it's just to be aware of them and know the acronyms, and we'll look at them in more detail. These two here, just be aware that capital or any money gained or acquired from the sale of an asset or to acquire any inheritance from family members, for example, you'd have to pay a tax on that, believe it or not. Okay, so for now, take notes on what I've said and answer these 3 questions. And note the outcome verbs, so to outline, to identify, to distinguish. Okay, so you have 3 questions there. 2 reasons for paying tax and 2 ways in which tax money is spent. The 2 reasons, so why do we pay it? Think about it from the government's point of view, so we just covered this. And 2 ways in which tax money is spent. Again, how does the government spend this money? Let's just go into more detail. Always state, explain, give examples. Identify 2 taxes that are common to both households and businesses. Again, name, explain, and distinguish between tax avoidance and tax evasion. So give the definitions and an example. Okay, so try those questions.